and give the floor to you both, Gillian, Roberto. Thank you for making a contribution to InterSect on day 4 of CCC.
Yeah, thank you, Ome, for inviting to give a contribution. Actually, it kind of kickstarted an interesting process. When you originally, I'm going to share the screen. Okay. Is it?
Yes.
So the title of this session is called Designing the PermaCult, which is the applying the permaculture principle to the network society. And this, as I was saying, it comes from the fact that you invited us to give to contribute to the InterSect, and seeing myself coming after the conversation about religion, I thought like, oh well, what can I talk about? And what we've been doing right now, it's really like using permaculture and trying to adapt it and introduce it to kind of society, but not as like a farming practice, but really a way of thinking. So then the meme of a permacult came just because of this, and I think it's kind of it's an interesting meme. Now, permacult, it's part of permaculture and cult, and the cult, it is usually considered pejorative, as in but actually, if you look at it at the meaning, it's really about being a social group that is coming together because it's passionate about a specific topic or a specific goal. And permaculture could be that goal. So I literally typed how to start a cult, and WikiHow had a step-by-step process. But I put it here because I think it's interesting. I'm just going to read it out. Cults are communities that fervently worship an object, person, or concept over all other things. While they do have the ability to transform into manipulative enterprises in wrong hands, they're essentially ways of organizing and transforming people's lives for the better. So, permaculture, on the other hand, is a system of assembling conceptual, material, and strategic components in patterns which function to benefit life in all its forms. So basically, combining these two things, we have like a cult that would benefit life in all its forms. I think it's kind of powerful as a design principle. And we're talking before as well, like, okay, religion has the kind of capacity of bringing people together, an ethos that will allow and empower people to find their compass in life. So I just prepared this presentation just for this, and so I want to really bring it as like a process where we experience ourselves permaculture and we start to think about what does this permaculture look like. I don't have the answer. I just want to start and get the ball rolling. So usually in permaculture, what you do is you do a permaculture design where you go there and you learn about the way of thinking. So in a way, we have also here Gillian that has been doing this kind of courses and is here to support me and contribute to this workshop. Gillian, you can say hi.
Yeah, I would say that it's been interesting. It's been a beautiful process to be in getting to know Roberto and Laura, and having spent some time at Liminal and staying on after the other people left. And we really haven't stopped our involvement with each other since I left a month and a half ago. And one of the things I did before I left was expose Roberto to some fundamental aspects of the permaculture design methodology and process. And it's been quite interesting to see him take it up. I'd already been using it with another colleague of ours in some design work and really see his intelligence organize around it. And one of the things I generally say at the start of teaching about permaculture is most people know permaculture as permanent agriculture. Again, permaculture, permanent agriculture. But really, I teach and hold it more as permanent culture, permaculture. And I love that he's lifted up the permacult and also looking at the sex and the intersection, which we'll lift up more as we go along. I also want to be clear that I often don't use the term permaculture at all because of what it connotes or brings up for people. But I think that there's an interesting holistic-esque approach. It still needs to grow a lot. But I'm here to support Roberto. We'll get into some exercises a bit later, but I think I love his way of thinking, and he's got a beautiful graphic presentation sensibility as well. So I'm also here for the ride, like you guys as well.
Okay, thank you, Gillian. So let's start. With every cult, we need to make some separation of something that is bad and something that is good. So here we have, I just type it for the people that maybe are mistaken. On the left side, there is the bad side, which is pretty much like the civilization, let it run with this kind of consumerism and wars and poverty and environmental degradation. And on the other side, this kind of sunsetty or sunrisey kind of farm-like life where we are aligned with nature and everybody's happy. Now, I just say it a little bit with this kind of tongue-in-cheek, because we know that it's not all the time sunset. There are always issues also in good, but if you say like, okay, if we play out what kind of image can we use to represent something we would like to see. So to our aid, it actually came a lot of these kind of alternative stories, like this counter stories of Game B or Solar Punk that we can really tap into and say, okay, well, we have this meme, but and this meme actually also apply to cities. It doesn't have to apply necessarily to just farm and everybody lives on a farm. But can we now make a cult that is basically embedding and living these memes directly and actually brings about this as a reality? So if we are agreeing that the good side is a side that is a civilization that is more aligned and more integrated in nature, then we have selected our good side and we can move on. This is what the cult is about. Now, because of course a picture is 1,000 words, a video is a bit more, and I found this video is actually kind of like upcoming, this solar punk kind of aesthetics. So it's actually nice to find an animation that kind of, although it is a commercial, but you need to root everything you do apparently on marketing and advertisement. But I'm just gonna play this video just to show a little bit of the vibe and the look and feel what
if it has video, if it has audio, it may not come through.
Yeah, it's all right. Just watch the images. I'll just disable it. So here you have some technology and sensors, but it's all integrated in nature. See, nature is growing into it. It's about, again, sunset time or sunrise. But yeah, the world is beautiful and there is community. The cities melt into nature and okay, here there's some drone delivery, some weather control systems. It's not really back to nature. It's almost like forward to nature. It's actually bring about the stuff that we like, because we are part of nature, and just bring in the technology and facilitate that relationship. So you have like a robot And the work of this in this the movie here is like, okay, our job is to plant the seeds, you know. So that's what you need to do. Is everybody has that as their job. Well, guess what? We'll get a world of abundance, and you know, it's yeah, I think that's a pretty easy way to move forward. Ultimately, that's what we need. You know. So how to get there? Because of course it's a beautiful story, but it's like, okay, how do we embed this into our daily practice if we have to start a cult that is all about this? Cult is the perma tools, and one of the most important tools in permaculture. By the way, these tools are fractal. First observation, and it's tools that are used for system thinking. So the first tool that I'm going to talk about is the permaculture lens. So you get an element and you get your lens here, and you just analyze that element in the term of its needs and inputs and its yields, its outputs. And with that, you consider it, consider also its behaviors and its characteristics. So inside this lens, you can put anything, any element. So in permaculture, you start to look at, for instance, a chicken. And you can put inside, so like, okay, what is their inputs, their outputs? Okay, it needs all this stuff here. It gives you eggs, it can give you meat, feathers, manure, methane, right? So it's all, and these are the characteristics. It's all here. And you analyze that, and you really need to be exhaustive into analyzing it. And so, for instance, the fact that it gives you CO2 and heat. Where is heat? Oh, it's not here. But and then you analyze that in relationship with other elements. So, for instance, is there anything that another object like a greenhouse needs that the chicken can give? And they say, okay, well, there is manure that could be used for fertilizer. There is CO2. There is heat that the greenhouse might need in the winter. So here you go, and you're combining two elements in their relation, to create something that is, that is sort of like, it's a system that it gives to each other. And the same happens with woods, yards. So this is what can give you to the house. To the house, you can give the eggs and the meat, and the house can give the chicken the food scraps, the food waste. So this is just to kind of give an example on the system way of thinking, which is also an agent-centric way of thinking that that could be applied to many things. So the objective of analyzing every element in that way is to create a webwork of connections. It's as more intricate and as more tight these connections are, the more resilient and interconnected the system is, and the more it will give you back. So, as you say, like, let's move away from the farm and agriculture concept, and let's apply that same lens to ourselves, people, or to the projects that we have, and to the places where we go to. So here we have the first exercise, and I forgot to put a link here to the mirror board. I'm going to put it on the in the chat, where we, for how long should we do? Actually, Gillian, maybe you can initiate the workshop. You have much more experience on this.
Yeah, sure. So normally, I mean, really in permaculture, a lot of it is about understanding the needs and yields of various elements of the system. And traditionally, we look at the chicken. It's like you go anywhere in the world and people will have done this chicken analysis exercise. The needs, the yields, the behaviors, and they get at things that you don't normally get at, which is like, well, actually, the chicken produces heat, it produces sound, it produces carbon dioxide. And also, what does it need? It needs oxygen, it needs comfort, shelter and protection. And so really what that does, if you know Meccano, it sets up these kind of whiskers of relationships. So you see in that diagram that the one that's a couple back there with the chicken with all the different arrows coming in and out of it, it's really trying to have a core practice of permaculture be about each element and the literacy that we can develop around all of the things coming in and out of that element. And so again, traditionally in the ethics of permaculture are about earth care, people care, and fair share, but really the focus has been on earth care and very much still in that rational reductive frame of reference, so that it's, stuff and things, mostly land-based, that are out there and people were not really looking at themselves. So we would look at a pond or a straw bale house as the elements, or a fence, or anything new or existing in the system. You really want to challenge yourself to think of things beyond you would normally look at. But one of the things that really helps us get at where the special magic is are the behaviors and characteristics of those elements. So in the case of the chicken, you could have a chicken. Or you could have a particular breed of chicken that was bred for certain behaviors and characteristics. Or you could have that particular chicken, like that chicken, and it has certain behaviors and characteristics contextualized within, the breed perhaps, or the context of where it's living, or within the fact that, it's a chicken. Or so as social permaculture has been growing over the past few years, one of the things that I've been doing, because people are well familiar with this example, because as I say, it's classic, is I have been asking people and holding workshops where we are beginning to look at humans. So you can put humans in this center underneath the lens as the element, so humans in general. You could, have some fun with cultural contexts, like put a Canadian in there, what are their behaviors and characteristics? Or we could put a particular person in there. So we could put Jillian in there. What does she need? What does she yield? What are my behaviors and characteristics? And even though I'm new to this community, you guys could probably do some measure of an analysis around me with, your exposure to me so far. So what we'd like to do now, just to kind of get us into this, because this will build towards other aspects of what we're going to do during our time together, is because we are going to be looking not only, can you go back one slide, please? We're not only going to be looking at people and their needs and yields and behaviors and characteristics, but also projects and places or hubs, etc. So we'd like to start by lifting up some literacy in ourselves. So if you can go to the next slide, Roberto. So we're going to put ourselves in here. And so over in the Miro board, and I think that Roberto has shared the link, we've created some spaces for you guys to jam out on this. And to the left of the circle, and some of your names are in there, and maybe Roberto can quickly help to put the other names in. I was just starting to do that when you called me, or you guys can grab one and erase the name that was in it. I just populated it last night with some names of people that have been in here. You also don't have to do it on the Miro board if you don't want to engage with Miro, or you'd rather have more privacy around this. And you're going to fill out on the left your needs or the inputs of what goes into the element of you. And on the right-hand side is your yields or outputs. And then down below is behaviors and characteristics. So, and you can jump around. You can do, most people start on the left because most of our dominant culture reads from left to right. And also that's what's going in, what's going out, and just brainstorm. So you can grab one of these. And you can also do it on your own, just on a piece of paper. And I really appreciate it if you actually do the exercise, because there's a lot of smart brains in this room and it's pretty easy to go, oh, I get the patterns, I'm going to go make a cup of tea. But there is something that will happen. You will discern some patterning, and feel free to start the exercise. You don't have to wait for me to finish. I'll just kind of talk as you're getting going and then field questions if anybody needs some direction. And some of the real magic happens in the behaviors and characteristics. And you can go as far or be as vulnerable as you want with it. And again, you don't have to write it down in the public space if you don't want to. But this is looking at the element of ourselves, which, funny thing is, we're involved with every system that we're in, so it's a pretty good element to have more literacy around. So welcome back to the others who are, there's a bit of noise on the line. Yeah, I guess somebody just maybe muted and it went away. As soon as the other folks get back, we're going to go into a larger just conversation about what that was like, and the patterns that people saw, so that we can learn from not only you individually but from the discussions in your pairing. So yeah, let's just see, so how was that? What came up? What patterns did you discern? What ahas did you have? Who'd like to start us off? Don't be shy. And if people want to turn on cameras, if they have their bandwidth, it might lend itself more to a community sensibility here. Thanks. Roberto, maybe you want to start us off.
Yeah, so there are a lot of the basic needs that you can list there. Okay, you need food, then maybe a potential specific kind of food, or but actually, like maybe the feeling of belonging to a tribe. And on the other hand, there was, of course, all our outputs, like if you be the chickens, and also realization of how much of that we have. But which is something that we need to deal with. Also, our waste. We are outputting waste. There's a lot of it. Of course, one can try to minimize that, but we have a lot. But one of the discussion we had was, the behavior and characteristics that are not necessarily the, something with between the input and the output, but actually defines how special you are in corresponding to the others. So it's what makes you special. It's in there. So that somehow it's kind of like something that takes the input and turns it into an output, depending on what you wrote there, right? And so it gives a lens to the output, basically, this behaviors and characteristics that goes beyond the general.
Let's hold that thread for both this session and beyond, but how that relates to zones, which we're going to come into next. After we're going to just wrap up this exercise with some insights and sharings, and then go on to another permaculture tool, which is zoning, which Roberto has been playing with. You probably have other things to share, but if we could just hear some kind of snippets or ahas, some of the most poignant pieces from other people and groupings, that'll give us a sense of building a shared understanding. Who has something that they'd like? What about you, Maya? Are we needing more reflection time?
Oh no, that's drawing. But I think there was, of course, the very shared pattern, for the basic needs, and inputs and outputs, and also, of course, that human sense of validation, community, that all things that Roberto said. However, we got talking maybe a bit off the subject of the exercise, but also that, human outputs, we have influence over them. A chicken doesn't really have influence over its outputs, or an apple tree, doesn't sit there and decide to, I don't like apples anymore, I'll do pears as my output. So that was kind of curious about, how maybe to some extent very embedded our outputs are, but at the same time, how, as humans, we do have control over control. If we're conscious, we can, change our outputs, or probably deal with a lot of different inputs, or something like that. So that was kind of curious.
Yeah, it's the term I thought when you said the first part, it's like agency, right? Like, and that's,
Yeah.
if we had put humans in there, so one of its behaviors or characteristics might be that we have more agency or more discretion. And I think it could be a good exercise. And in my courses, I do that, just putting humans in there.
Yeah. Yeah, and I put I put agency on top of my list of needs, but maybe that's why the conversation went a bit that way. I think it's just very curious, how even like with different kind of behaviors and traits, that we do have very similar needs and inputs to some extent. So that was curious. Yeah.
Great. Yeah, and I think that in permaculture, we're designing for ecosystems. So one of the other lenses we could bring in is to bring the element of ourself. And as I hearken to in the exercise, you can contextualize yourself by putting yourself in imagined, either existing and or desired ecosystems. And so some of these needs point to the design, like Martin was sharing, and he's moved out to a homesteading context in Ireland. And a lot of the ecology is now centered around the fact that they're building the homestead and homeschooling 3 young children, right? So that, that very much skewed his approach to this.
Yeah. And I think, also thinking about that, like the agency that we have now is a very new thing. I mean, it used to be, your father was a shoemaker and your grandfather was a shoemaker. Well, you have one thing to do, so you're out like that apple tree, and now it's, it's just that freedom that's very new.
Right. And so this can bring in the 4th dimension of time. Like when I'm helping people design for land, I say, get old air photos, and they say, well, I found some that are really old. Really old ones are good because we want to see progression and change over time. So a lot of things have changed in terms of access to roles, etc. So I want to get a few more threads woven in here from some other folks. Thanks for sharing. Who's got some juice to share next? Yeah, thanks. Vadim. Oh, yeah. Boom. Omar, are you going to go?
Maybe I would invite TG to share his reflections, since I've been talking so much all day long.
Great. Thanks.
If TG is still with us.
Right. And Marianne, Noah, you were unmuted there, and you were in the exercise. Do you want to share? Or maybe you weren't unmuted.
Yeah, sure. I was in a breakout room with Roberto, and we kind of came to this insight that a lot of the inputs are very universal. Like food, water, air, safe space. But for me, like, one thing that also really stands out, and we don't really talk about that often, it does come to some extent to the surface when you talk about tribe or a sense of belonging. But I think what we all need really is love. And it's it's a strange concept to talk about. But I do think that is like a fundamental human need, and also the cause of a lot of, suffering and trauma if love is lacking from your inputs. So that's something I just wanted to mention. And I think also love is an important output that we can then again like re-share or like extend to the ecosystem. And I think another output that is often overlooked is like your poo and pee. It's like very basic to human existence to have to go to the toilet. And then yeah, I agree with Maja that it's kind of you can choose what kind of work you contribute to the whole. It's and for myself I kind of distinguish between useful work and creative work. So yeah, you have like useful stuff that you can do, like I don't know, build a bridge or fetch water or that kind of stuff. And then the creative work is more like making paintings or sharing ideas and that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thanks for that. And I don't know if you want to pop it up in the stream there, Roberto. But one of the tools that, well, I'll speak to that in a second, but just to lift up the love part, I was thinking you could put love in the magnifying glass and what does it need and what does it yield? Or a big part of permaculture is about creating a webwork of relationships. So if you put love there and what it needs and yields, and what it yields could match up with what you need. So the lens could be love, but what does that really mean? Like it can get at the next level of needs. So you can both amalgamate it up to love, but then you can also fine grain it down to, so what is it? What does that mean for me? What is that literacy? So thanks for sharing, Noah. Don't want to take up too much more time, but would love a little soupçon of hearing from a couple of other people if there's something that you think would be useful for the group to hear or for you to say out loud and about yourself in front of the group. Roberto, did you put the stream back up on that slide? Can't hear you. You're muted. So so if we go to the next slide, I think one of the ways of helping to understand the different types of needs is this Maslow's hierarchy, which I'm sure that almost everybody here has some measure of familiarity with. So you can see the basic needs, the psychological needs, and the self-fulfillment needs. And so that can be another rubric. I personally have been wanting to evolve Maslow's hierarchy of needs for a long time, and I know Neve has done some work around that, but I think that there's more work to be done still. And I think literacy in human needs is critical to this cultural transition that we're in, even within permaculture, because people have been very much unself-aware, very much focused on earth doing, and can be replicating the same or similar patterns of violence in and through and around ostensibly doing the good work. And that's shifting. People have been lifting up more. Like I remember when I taught the first urban permaculture course in Toronto, and it was like, oh my God, what are you talking about? And now, we have urban farmers and they can make a living doing this of less than a decade. So there's a lot of evolution happening. A lot of evolution possible. So if we were doing a fuller workshop on this, there'd be plenty more, but I'm hoping that you can see that there's some patterns here. And one of the strongest patterns for me is for people and for us to co-create a safe enough space for people to go more deeply into behaviors and characteristics. Because what I've seen in all the work that I do, that it's generally that is where the energy gets stuck in the system. And how do we have more literacy about ourselves and each other and increasingly more effective ways of navigating that and not just using the old tool, a lot of which have some measure of violence in them. So I'll just see if anybody else wants to make a final comment on this exercise. I know not everybody had to speak. but we still have some other stuff that we want to do in the remaining 50 minutes, and I want to make sure that we leave enough time for that. So is there anything burning from anybody? There's static. At Martin, okay? Oh, no.
Okay. I'll go if that's okay. So I'm just curious. You mentioned violence, and we're talking about sort of literacy in a wider sense. I'm just wondering if this has overlap with Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, and which is something I've kind of stumbled across and tried to use a bit in the last couple of years. There seems to be overlap, and I'm wondering if there are reasons to be exploring other areas, or I don't know how these things synthesize together. So I'd be grateful for some.
Yeah, I think that nonviolent communication, or NVC, you're referring to Marshall Rosenberg, who was one of the originators, is a lot about needs. And you probably don't have with you, Laura, but I gave them a laminated card, which is a whole bunch of needs in different types that they probably have at home. So yeah, there's definitely some mapping onto that we can get at that. And then a lot of our behavior is and feelings are about what happens when our needs get met and what happens when our needs don't get met. And this is one of the reasons of having the usefulness and the power of having more literacy around our needs. So again, this was only meant to be kind of a window onto not only a fundamental tool. If you can take the slides back, Roberto, to just look at the chicken, and then go back down quickly through the slides that we've been in. So, and the one above it, please. So just that there's an element in a system. We're taking a look at its needs or inputs, yields or outputs, and its behaviors and characteristics. Next slide. We traditionally are used to looking at, Roberto, if you can go to the next slide. We're traditionally used to looking at the chicken. And there's a couple of diagrams we have there, its needs, its yields, its behaviors and characteristics, that one and the one underneath it. And really what we're about is trying to use those whiskers from understanding an element more clearly and cultivate a webwork of relationships, a webwork of connections. And we can apply this to people, projects, places, and we're going to go into that more in the next slide. I thank you for willing to risk and taking the time to look at yourself under that lens of your needs, yields, behaviors, and characteristics. Again, I think there's a lot of juice in looking at behaviors and characteristics. And for the next slide, you can look at the needs in terms of the construct of Maslow's hierarchy. And, this is fundamental literacy for us going forward. So this was just meant to be a little exposure. And now we're going to move on and look more at what are human yields. So thanks.
Thank you, Gillian. So one of the stuff that we touch is, we all share at least, this Maslow hierarchy of needs. Of course, that's not the definitive approach. There are multiple ways of looking, but this is something that is recognizable. And, as a categorization, it's okay to just say, there is something that we do have in common. Then when we actually look at the human outputs, indeed, it also got surface the thing that we can choose. We can actually dictate or try to come up with output that we want to seek and what to achieve. And this Ikigai kind of Venn diagram on the right side, for who is not familiar with it, it means the reason for being, which lies at the intersection of what you love, what the world needs, what you can get paid for, and what you're good at. If you're working in theory in this kind of like intersection of all these aspects, you're basically doing your reason for being. And that's, of course, is dictated by all of these things, but also your experience and your history. what drives you, what motivates you, what problems do you see in the world. So an interesting thing about this is that, you know, when we actually look at all the elements of humans, or all the elements together, we can actually link the needs to the we can actually link these needs to the to each other, and we can see that actually the world needs, it's something that it comes together, brings us together. So the world is our shared environment. So we can already take one piece out of the ikigai in a way. Another thing is what you can get paid for. And usually what you need money for is actually to satisfy your local need. So it does not really belong into the output of humans. So we can actually kind of have this Maslow pyramid instead of what you can get paid for, and then use that information, that input, whatever it is that you described as your input, you just communicate it to the collective and makes it part of what the world needs. So why am I doing this? It's just to, well, bring you to the attention that potentially what you wrote into what your needs and your output are, there might be other people that needs exactly what you can give and can give you exactly what you need. And as you make this connection between all of these elements, you're actually creating this kind of loop and strength, which is the collective. So if there is a belief of the PermaCult, at least by just analyzing just one aspect, which is just the human aspect, is the belief that we can provide for each other. And how? By looking, by first of all signaling what it is that we need, because without that we don't know. And then depending on what you're good at and what you love, help each other. So now, of course, we can, as Julian was saying, we can apply this also to projects and to places. So projects have needs. You can call it bounty, you can call it people, and you can ideas, or and what do they yield? Well, potentially they might yield something that either the world needs or we need. So projects become an entity that can actually help us filling the gaps of the mesh net that we, the meshwork of interconnection that we started to create by analyzing the human element. And the places, what does the place need and what does it yield? Again, it will need contributions and it will need technology, it might need projects, and we will yield things that are important for us or the planet. So we can also apply this to community. What does the bonfire community needs? What the people at Liminal Village needs? What does or the Hackalong or any other community? Again, it's different lenses that we can put and start to add to the work of interconnection, so that the more elements we add to it, the more interaction there is with each other, and the more value we can generate for ourselves, for every node on the network. Now, another tool that I would like to discuss here in the permaculture tools is the zones and the sectors, and the emphasis is on the sect. So let's see how we. So for the zones, actually, let's just start for the zones here. The zones is something that is around you. So if you are at the center in the permaculture, your house, that's zone 0, something that you're there all the time. The zone 1 is the one where you can walk in your bathrobe. and you basically visit daily. That's where you pick up your herbs and, something that is very handy to have close to your kitchen. So the basic ingredient. Then as distance increases, you have like the visit frequently, occasionally, infrequently, and up to zone 5, where it's just nature.
Roberto, can I say something there just quickly? So it's not just about, if you can go back one slide, it's not just about what you need, but it's also elements. Remember, we're looking at elements in the system that might need you. So I might want those things on a daily basis or visit frequently, and or those things might need you to visit them. And so this tool of relative location is something that's pretty fundamental. So if you put your pen on a piece of paper on your bed and then didn't lift your pen but traced your path in a given day or really in a year, the amount of strokes from the pen will give you a zonation on your. And a lot of it is about energy efficiency of things that you need and want close, and or things that need and want you close. And that can flex with different times of the year as well.
Yeah. Another aspect is the sectors, which are basically slicing the zones depending on what the sector is called. So, for instance, where is the sun, or where the wind comes from. But actually, when we're talking, this is really, we're talking on a local basis, but it could also mean what aspects are affecting the different zones. So you can have like a specific zone for, so when we're breaking away from the kind of the distance kind of metaphor, we can, okay, I'm just going to illustrate it. So here, this is a liminal village. We have 2 zone zeros. Some people live here, some people live here. So we will have a zone 1, and they will have a zone 1, but they're actually some sort of intertwined. So our zone 1 is their zone 1, and so on. Their zone 2, our zone 3. So you need to consider also that it's not just about you, it's also about the interaction with others. So if we extend the zoning and we actually go a little bit further in distance, we have like 10 minutes away the kindergarten of my daughter, and that's for us zone 1. And they say, wait, how is this possible? Wasn't that circles? No, not necessarily. In one aspect, the aspect of bringing the children, zone 1, it's where you bring the children pretty much every day. So you visit this place on a daily basis. And guess what? That's zone 1 also for all the other families that are bringing their kids. So in one way, in the same way that these houses are related and connected in zone 1, we are also related and connected to all the families of all these children. And when you actually start to think that way, you start to unlock like, hey, wait a second. If we do have some needs where we can actually go and fetch something that you need in your kitchen, you go out and fetch from your herb garden. How about now fetching or asking this greater community something that you might need? So you see how this way of thinking in zoning and needs inputs and outputs are actually, that could actually start to create an intricate web of connections that goes beyond your direct locality. As a matter of fact, we can put different lenses also on the zoning. So distance is the one that I was talking about now, but how about appreciation? So you are in my zone 1 of appreciation, or my zone 1 of trust, or mutual commitment. We are committed to meet each other on a daily basis, wherever we are. So also in terms of a project, in terms of time. So in the end, we're looking at some. I think this is a slice of a pine needle. I think it's beautiful, and kind of represent a little bit. You can kind of feel the zoning in there, and also like this kind of organic kind of setup where you have this kind of like feeling of this dimensionality, because each one of these lens that you can add, it basically creates a sort of like a dimension that you can look at, and this would be like a slice of that dimension that you look at. So this might be the trust slice, but how does it look into the commitment or the appreciation slide? So when we actually consider the two zones independently and we actually start to bring them together, that's where the magic can happen. So, and in the intersection actually gets, if you think about ecosystem, the moment in which an ecosystem turns into another ecosystem, that's the moment in which both ecosystems are present. So it's much rich, and that's actually the ecotone. It's called the ecotone. So when we're actually intersecting one project or two projects, we can actually have, you can see at what kind of rank are you intersecting? Are you intersecting on a daily basis, right? Or are you, we just know about each other, so you enter the sphere of awareness. Let's call that rank 5. We can actually say a rank 1, where you basically the projects are so related and so connected that you actually meet on a daily basis, and you almost consider yourself as the same project. Or maybe rank 3, where the distance here is 3. So it's like, okay, we're meeting now and then, we're working together, we're collaborating. But we can really use this framework of zoning not only for the physical aspect of distances, but really about on the metaphysical level of ideals and collaboration, and use that and yet apply the same tools. So here's an image of potentially 3 projects, the relationship with three projects, where this is a rank 3 and this is a rank 4, sorry. And you see how you can you are in each other's zoning. Another thing is that from project consists of people, and you can actually get the person that you're referring to and then enter its own zoning and see what kind of projects and persons. So this is a way also that we're going to be able to navigate relations and that on who is working on what and who is supporting the person that is working on that, who are the people that are the closest. So in this way, if we actually consider this, we could use this as a framework also to dictate, and not to dictate, but to kind of distribute rewards. I mean, to bring this back into something more concrete, we can organize entire structures, entire organizations with this kind of patterns, where you have then the main stewards in the center, and then you create membranes that are more and more further apart, are actually spanning the whole organizations. Also, the frameworks that you use is just about people on board, being onboarded onto the process and climbing up, passing from membrane to membrane, and stopping in whatever position they feel happy with.
Yeah, so here's some examples of it's applying the zoned, and this is with the sociocratic methodology within the International PermaCult Laboratory, with different circles and projects. And it's just a quick visual to show the various types of entities that are coming into being. There's a color We use different symbologies. And if you go to the next slide, that's a focused view on the collab, but this is the collab contextualized within the relationships with other entities that we're involved with within the membrane of that larger central circle that's shaded kind of orangey yellow, and also other relationships and looking at values and flows. And we've progressed this work even beyond that diagram. And this is another diagram where it's attempting to map that ecology onto an actual landscape-based type of an ecology where you can see the different types of functional elements of plants on the left-hand side. And so we're playing around with this as systems, because one of the things that we're looking at is how do things grow and change? How are they fed? How are they nurtured? How do they system conditions? Again, what are the needs and wants, behaviors, and characteristics? And so in working with Roberto, as he's bringing in these permaculture tools to what he was already doing, and we're weaving together, we're having some synergy. And part of the mana or the fuel is money, as well as other needs. And so we have some funding for a project that we're working on, and we're looking at shifting the structure of how to award and reward, and how to use sociocracy, moreover probably holacracy, and maybe something that we're going to evolve to, drawing on some of the intelligence we can get at with these permaculture tools, and really trying to co-create ecosystems where we can meet more of our needs in healthier, generative ways. And so we're looking at rewards and value flows in systems. Next slide for you, Roberto.
Yeah, so, for instance, we can have a reward function, which is basically dictating, like, okay, well, here's our zones, and we can have different kind of functions here depending on whatever the needs are. This could be tunable, and the idea is that we have, just a second, like that, we're just walking upstairs. So bad. She got priority, sorry.
It's definitely your zone zero, and your responsibility
yes,
as a father is zone zero.
Ok, vieni. Sì, che ci può andare. Okay, so here we're talking about rewards, and now I need to come back to the focus. Each of the different zones can actually have this kind of rewards that is set, and this reward you can see on the side here. It's money and access, because actually we don't need necessarily just the money. We need access to the things that we need. So if we say that in a way, if this is a cult, then we need to think about like levels and how to level up. And maybe you enter zone 5 and you get access to some of the stuff that the cult can give you. But if you want more, then you need to progress. And as you progress, you actually get more and more access. And when we are actually at level 0, which is your home, you actually have access to everything you need, or everything that this cult might give you. So when I was actually doing this, I felt a little bit uncomfortable, because I actually realized, like, wait a second, but this is like a little bit like that's one of the bad things about the cult, right? This kind of layer. It almost feels like a class. And you have multiple classes here. But then again, it's actually kind of reflecting on that. That's not necessarily the same. I mean, when we're talking about the irony here, there are also 5 zones, and zone 0 would be just money. You probably see this picture. But now we actually have a difference, a very significant difference, is that anybody can create one of this zone. So everybody could be at zone 0 and pretty much kind of like spread their own self-evangelization to actually say, join my zoning. But the difference is that actually, in order to level up, you give access to resources that you're not used. You're contributing to the projects. You can actually recognize and boost other projects, or stake some ETH. That's kind of like the shortcut when you buy into a cult. The difference that I wanted to actually kind of stress here is that we choose. So we are the one that can just choose to which project or to are we going to contribute. So although you might start at zone 5 because you're far away and you just entered and people don't know you, and you will have to kind of climb the ladder to actually get more and more access. You have chosen which of the topic or which of the project or what things is important to you. In a way, it's not a pyramid anymore, but it's something like this, where you have a network which is supporting you to actually ascend the class struggle or the zoning. So I really like this picture because it kind of like maybe even shows the connection, the intricate webwork of connections between nature and the projects and the minds of people. And there's also some sort of a zoning here that kind of creates this kind of city-like painting on the back here, which could be like a kind of a summary of a visual representation of the summary of these tools that we discussed so far. Now, there are also other tools and other things in this cult, I guess. One of the things that it's interesting is the lunation protocol, which is basically how can we use a physical clock to time our efforts, and just saying, okay, here is a sprint. It's a kind of like a task or progress bar in the sky, and it takes where we are in this co-creative process. Also, we can talk about the lodges that are pretty much hubs or places where the permacult is represented and is welcoming the people to actually come and experience it and contribute to that location and to the project that are running in that location. So this could be anything like eco-villages that already exist that actually are kind of say that they are open for guests, but could also be places that are actually created by the network by potentially purchasing or a piece of land and starting to regenerate it. So I'm trying to draw a lot of parallels here with how a cult works, but in practice, what we're really looking for is a new culture, what you can call an eco-civilization, and where then everybody is empowered to follow what they think is important and apply their skill set and their passions into it. So this is the design I got so far, and using this kind of tools. Of course, I've been developing also some smart contract that goes with it. But the idea is like, okay, you can join the PermaCult cult and bring in your own project and your own framework, as long as you list the need and you state your the lunation protocol. And if you want to join or support this, you can just stake, and that's a way to power up the cult and to potentially climb up the ladder a little faster. So I bought this today, but so I don't know if the DNS is working. But if you want, you can join permacult.io, and we can talk. We can discuss further on how to bring up this eco-civilization together.
Thanks, Roberto. So yeah, so this has been interesting. He's got kind of a dry sense of humor. I hope it's not lost on everybody here, but PermaCult and the intersection and all that kind of stuff. And yeah, really, we're having an intersection with some permaculture tools meeting some of the work that's already been happening. I think that there's loads of possibility. And I think coming into the new year, we're going to be getting into doing a lot more serious design work. And already, I really just met this community a week ago, and I didn't know that this event was even going on this week. And then, gosh, I should go. So I rearranged what I thought was going to be my only kind of week off in the year to do a bunch of other stuff that I haven't been able to get to. But I've been prioritizing this because I feel like there's a lot of investment, a lot of intelligence here, and I would love to weave forward more with these tools. But right now we've got about 20 minutes to discuss and respond to this. So I'd like to open up the floor and see what's been stimulated in the community.
Thank you very much for the presentation. Really beautiful visuals and good puns. I've been following while having breakfast, I think. So I will leave the floor for anyone else who wants to add something.
Thanks, Irma. You've been holding it down. Yeah. So anybody want to weave in? Nowhere, you unmute?
Yeah, I was just very, very happy and pleasantly surprised to also see some references to movements I've been involved with, especially like the solar punk aesthetic movement that like to make our cities more green. I had one small like point of feedback, like some of the slides, especially where the diagrams were really detailed, they weren't that visible because we're seeing it on like a smaller screen. So like where the diagrams were really detailed, I couldn't really follow anymore. But I guess it was also not really the point to understand everything what's going on the diagram, but more so to see the tools in action and the kind of systemic way of thinking about how to organize a community or like a permaculture ecosystem. As was shared already, like beautiful images. I especially like the one where you kind of saw these light or like energy lines from the people to the trees to the project, and like everything kind of being connected as a grid. And very powerful way of seeing it. Beautiful. Yes, that one. Yes, wonderful. Yeah, it's really my hope to contribute to something like this, and I will be definitely joining your initiative, the PermaCult. I'm very curious what we can create as a community.
When we were together last, we were practicing yoga and meditation. So it's also welcome, in our meetings to bring in some of the methodologies that you're stewarding in other parts of your life, and for us to play and experiment and learn with each other. Thanks, Noel. When I reflected to Roberto, I said, "Hey, you're good at this stuff," and he's like, "Whoa, I don't know about that." In the typical kind of shutdown, we finally get some. We don't know what to do with. It's like, dude, just accept a compliment. You're good at this. It's okay. So on Roberto's diagram, this is definitely one of his yields, and he's a deep thinker. Yeah, and it's been a real joy to be journeying with him. And so, what about the rest of y'all here? Anybody have something they'd like to weave into the conversation? How did this land with you? What's alive?
Hey, Roberto, I really appreciate that you shared your kind of your point of view regarding the kindergarten. Because for me, the main point of reference would be my job, where you go every day and you kind of share it. But the way you shared your personal experience as a father, kind of that changed my whole view and brought all the good memories from the previous couple of lunations I spent. And I'm full of joy that this is progressing and evolving. You kind of really mapped it all out. Yeah. And I can't wait to actually participate in it all. Again, let's level it up again. More. Good job, man.
Yeah, really enjoyed the presentation. I thought so. There was overlapping circles that you placed different frames or lenses in and spread out the multi-dimensionality of values. And so what I saw there, I think you seemed kind of you felt like you were worried about it seeming like a hierarchy or a cult, but it's just at least something around that area sounded like it. There was a sense of an opinion that wasn't wrong, in that, like, yes, you could perceive stuff in a pyramid and, spacing out values. We do prioritize and order stuff. And so I just appreciated the perspective that, yes, there is a multi-dimensionality or a hypergraph of value judgments that we navigate in our daily lives. And you can encode that in various forms. I wasn't sure whether there was a proposition to encode that in some kind of protocol, but just throwing the protocol out the window, I think it's a good thing to recognize.
Yeah, maybe Roberto, you want to talk a bit more about the kind of ideas about applying this stuff going forward into some projects.
Well, the idea of the agent centricity, so applying the zoning around us. So, and just saying, okay, well, we know each other here. We meet, with some people we meet once, twice a year on the equinoxes, right? With some people we meet every day. So actually having that kind of zoning diagram, you actually do it from your own perspective. Who do I work with, and in which zone are they? And that's your own diagram. And then remember, Josh, when we were talking about the holons, as you were saying, like, well, it needs to happen that everything that your personal holon receives should be forwarded to others. So now, one of the things that I made is the zoned holon, where basically everything you receive, then you will forward to the people you're stating you're working with. And if that's kind of like a cultural difference here, where it's not about like, well, I got paid. This is not I'm gifting to the people I'm working with. And if everybody does that, we all become part of this graph. So in practice, you have the opportunity of rethinking the way that we organize ourselves and we coordinate ourselves, and how to receive rewards about that. So the idea is like, if now we talked about people, but if we talk about projects, is how do projects relate to each other, how they collaborate with each other. Project is made by people, so anything that the project receives gets gets forwarded to the people that are contributing towards it. And this kind of dynamic, this flow starts to happen. And ideally, what I would like to do in the next year is actually to try it out and see, okay, where does it go wrong? How people perceive and feel when actually anything that is happening there is they're focusing what they believe and they get rewarded for that, right? So potentially we have a little bit of a tryout to do an experimentation, but the best way to do it is really to put up to have that system functioning. That means that the infrastructure is working and the flow stuff is on top, and it actually gets in there. So I'm looking forward for in this year to experiment with these concepts and see where we can where it works and where it doesn't.
And for me as a non-coder, I'm really been, having met Nicolas Luc at the Synergy Hub in Rotterdam 5 years ago, and had a fairly deep connection and have stayed in touch. And when about a year and a half ago, talking to him again and really just encouraging him to step into what it is that was trying to come through him and really bring that to the world. And so even without coding, being in that relationship, but now I'm in a relationship with a guy who was mathematics 2 days ago and looking at the architecture of things. And I'm really interested, can not only continue to figure this out, but the process of trying to code it, if you will, in a codified landscape is actually going to show some architectures that can help us figure it out. And how do those work synergistically? And what are the value structures and flows? What are the social agreements? So permaculture, these are just tools. Permaculture didn't necessarily invent these tools, but they drew them from other professional practices when it came into being in the 70s. And I also think that a lot of these tools could stand to be evolved. I actually wasn't involved teaching permaculture for about a decade. And I feel like a lot of it was Bill Mollison and David Holmgren came up with stuff, and then it just kind of got entrenched. Kind of like with Steiner, everything is super sacrosanct around biodynamics. But actually, if you read Steiner, he said, this is just what I'm thinking and is coming through me. Please meet it and dance with it. And so I think really it's just different tools and structures trying to get at intelligence. And right now we're at a very, I think, pivotal cultural framing where things have changed in a short amount of time. And how are we stewards of this evolution? And again, these can help us see aspects of the whole. They're lenses. Again, they're tools that we can use. The tools can evolve. They don't have to be cow. I definitely don't. As I said earlier, I don't use the term permaculture because it doesn't always serve, because then people think I'm the gardener. And I am. I know how to garden, and I also garden on a people and human level and build soil in all kinds of. And there's ways that we can use analogies from the natural world to bring them to this more mechanized human artifact world that we've been co-creating. It's time for that to shift. I really appreciate working with Roberto because he's very like a strong extrovert, being in deep relationship. He keeps sharing what he's thinking. We actually have quite a high quality getting to Miro and other things. Not only he and I do one-on-one, but people. I'd really like to open that up to members of this community. I already spoke. We didn't have much time to do this preparation, to prepare this, and you did a stalwart job around traveling and staying up late with old friends in Amsterdam, holidays. Again, hats off to you, and I think we can build on this. So I'd like to invite you guys into playing with us around some of this, and there may even be, I don't want to overpromise, but ways that with some of the funding we have and or could have, open up various flows around various configurations. So you, even if you have other jobs, or there might be some needs that can be met in this system, that being in this system will also help not only you, but your other work And I think that that's leverageful, which is one of the reasons it's meaningful for me to expose Roberto to these tools and have him take them up and use them. And I don't think we're done with them yet. So you're welcome to play with us. We have just 5 more minutes or so. Maybe Roberto wants to say something in closing, and maybe a person or two that hasn't spoken yet, we can weave a couple of stitches in before we close. Anybody?
Maybe something to share an appreciation of the framing of permaculture to dynamics that are not only in gardening. I could see how it maps to other domains and areas of life. And yes, I was watching some of these diagrams. I was thinking of how these other tools we've been discussing about in the morning, the tools that we don't have, to map out, to make sense of these other ways to frame what we want to achieve, what responsibilities we take, how they are connected with others. That it seems like the only tools we have for coordination come from the culture of corporate world and that type of organizational dynamics. And it's very inspiring to see that you're mapping out how to apply these, or the ideas of permaculture being skeleton that can other specific tools can be built on top. I'm very curious to see how you push this into practical examples and communities that apply this, that talk about this more explicitly, more openly. And a theme that I've been bringing up the entire assembly is having a more deeply connected network of local groups and or online groups that are applying these tools, these attitudes, this to build a culture where we have more examples of where we can find, as you were saying, to that our yields can arrive in the hands of the other communities that may use them to level up, to build capacity, and to create some virtuous dynamics between different groups. I'll be definitely involved in the capacity that I can, and I'll be very excited to visit Roberto and see how this is being implemented in the actual ground in Liminal.
Mm-hmm. There's a couple quick points. There's a lot of deep thinking here, and so the real practical examples. Like, I got over to zone 1 as soon as I heard there, and there's a tremendous amount that can happen at that school. And I think that we're looking at co-creating and growing ecosystems of relationships here. So I'd rather you think of that than just permaculture. Roberto?
Yeah, indeed, I think that the kindergarten, it's a great local, it's in our zone 1 local experimentation place, and that we're definitely going to use. But indeed, as Vadim was saying, like, well, you have a kindergarten, I'm going to work. Yeah, well, there are people, and they also have needs, and like, how can you satisfy each other's needs? So it's also kind of like reframing your current relation and your current place. So it's actually the way of thinking about it, and that the lens that now permaculture can give. Thinking devices, if you want, that to actually look at things in that kind of aspects, and then potentially use that information to change something, or to facilitate a reconnection that goes beyond, these are my colleagues. Oh, okay, these are my colleagues, and now are in my zone 1, and they have their own zone 1, and here we have a network, and it's not just about the relationship of going to work and that's it. So yeah, if there are tools, digital tools, in the end, ultimately it's always a physical tool. It's your person dealing with other people. But the digital tool can facilitate you to actually, share what your needs are, and so that others within your extended network is going to be aware of it and is going to be able to provide. And if we do this, that it's a session. So it's not just, oh, okay, it happened now. There wasn't, and now there is. It's just a slow building, like nature does, to build more and more complex ecosystems of provisioning.
Yeah, we're co-creating a forest garden, and we've got all these nodes and guilds all over, and it's only really gonna grow over time. We don't have to be prejudiced towards it being physically located. We are physically located somewhere, and that is valid, especially in this time of the shift to the kind of global economy distributed. So our experience is valid. It doesn't have to be in zone drive from liminal village for it to be valid. We can design for the reality of who we are and what we're already doing. So that is permaculture. It's designing for what is, and trying to aid and abet more of the goodness that wants to become, especially if we apply ourselves in it.
Okay, so thank you very much, Gillian, Roberto, for the very, very inspiring presentation, for facilitating the workshop, the discussions, for also giving me a break to grab some lunch. It's been a pretty intense day so far.
Yeah.